Well, hey friends, it's Chef Andrea here, and it's Q&A with Chef A, the podcast. Today's topic is all about salt, salt, salt. This particular video is about the number one mistake home cooks make with salt. Are you ready for that? Here we go. The number one mistake that home cooks make with salt in their home cooking. You're not using enough. How about that? All right, today on Q&A, let's talk salt. Hey guys, Chef Andrea, and today we're talking all about one of my favorite ingredients in the kitchen, and that is salt. It's also a topic that comes up all the time in our Home Chef series and in my cooking classes in general. I'm asked about it pretty consistently, and I have a few areas in the world of using salt at home that I want to cover through these pods. But in the current podcast, what we're going to talk about specifically is what I think is the easiest thing to fix with home cooking salt mistakes, and that is simply that you're probably just not using enough. How about that? So let's talk a little bit about how we got to a point where we started using less and less salt in our own home cooking. And how do I know you're not using enough salt in your own home cooking? So I'm going to mention this a couple of times throughout these podcasts, but when I am out in the real world, and no, I don't wear my jacket everywhere I go. So let's say I'm at a seated event, like a wedding, and there are 12 of us at a table, and I only know my husband sitting next to me. So everyone's doing introductions. How do you know the bride? How do you know the groom? What do you do for a living? Where do you live? When people find out that I am a professional cook for a living, I often get some questions. And it's funny because essentially I'm getting the same question every single time. And the question is either going to be super specific. Every time I go to make a certain Asian stir fry, it just never has the flavor of the one at the restaurant. So that's pretty specific, right? But I actually get a more general question, which will be, hey, can you tell me how come, when I go to the restaurant, those pork chops have a sear on them, or those scallops have a sear on them? Or how come when I go to a restaurant, their steaks have so much flavor and mine at home are kind of meh? To be honest with you, that basic question, why isn't my food, even the specific one about the Chinese, the specific one, like the Chinese question, or the general one, why isn't my steak as flavorful? What they're really asking me is, why does food taste better in a restaurant? And there are two simple answers to that. One has to do with heat source, and we're going to talk about upping your heat at home to get some more restaurant quality results in your home cooking in other pods. So hang on for those. But the shortest, simplest answer that I can give anybody who asks me, why aren't I getting the Chinese restaurant Chinese food at home? Why is my steak kind of meh and the one at the steakhouse is killer? You know what the simplest answer to that is almost every time? You're not using enough salt. It is amazing how salt forward we are as professional cooks in restaurants. And the complete opposite is what's happening at home, to the point where I've had people tell me they don't even salt their food at all while they're cooking it and just rely on a little shaker at the table. That's not going to give you restaurant results. So let's talk about why we're not using enough salt at home. How do I know that? Well, I know it because people come take a class with me and have something that's really straightforward, and they go, why is this just kicking with flavor? And we'll get talking about the fact that I'm using enough salt in it. And people will say to me consistently, this is why we're not using salt at home. Oh, I was told we're supposed to be backing off of sodium in our diet. Okay, so let's talk about that for just a minute. First and foremost, if you have been prescribed by a physician a specific milligram of sodium that you need to stay within in a day, that's the end of this video. Turn it off, move on, enjoy. If you are on a specific doctor-prescribed regimen for very low sodium diet, you need to stick with that. You understand? There's just simply no messing with that. Here's what I will tell you though. 90% of the people who ask me about salt at home have self proclaimed low sodium diets in the house. No one has told them that they have high blood pressure, that they have hypertension, or that they have any reason to reduce salt in their diet. It is something that they picked up on through media, through generalizations, and just decided for themselves that sodium's a bad idea in the basic diet. And so therefore we don't salt our food at home. Now, I'll tell you another little secret about that. In my experience, when I am approached by someone who's asking about seasoning at home, restaurant quality flavors at home, and we get talking about salt, almost every time, if it is a couple situation, one of them is forever disappointed at how little salt is in the food at the house. And it has become almost a constant battle. Okay. If you are not on a doctor-prescribed low-sodium regimen, and you are the one who is determining that you cannot have any extra salt in your food at home, I have news for you. Your partner may be right. You are probably under-seasoning your food, and it's probably a little frustrating. How did we get there? Why do we think that we can't put salt in our food at home? For people that are my age and older, there's a real simple answer for that. If we're very honest about it, our Surgeon General from, I'd say, mid-90s said so, right? Do you remember him? He came out and said, C. Everett Koop, he came out and said, American diets are riddled with sodium and we have to pull it back. And it was a very generalized statement. And the thing that's so interesting to me is that the people who took that to heart are actually the people that he really wasn't talking to. Follow me on this one. If you heard the Surgeon General declare that the sodium levels in Americans' diets was completely unhealthy and needed to be adjusted immediately, and then you went home and for the next 20 years cooked undersalted food at home, do you know that he wasn't talking to you to begin with? Because what I know from that choice and from those 20 years is that you're a home cook. You cook your own food. Who he was speaking to was the person whose food is handed to them through their driver's side window 3 meals a day. The person he was speaking to is the person who was relying on microwave, ready-to-eat, canned, ready-to-eat food products for the majority of their diet. If you were already interested in and actively cooking your own foods from scratch at home, that's not who he was talking to, guys. I'm here to tell you. At that time, in the mid-90s, when that statement was made, this country was obsessed with ready-to-eat foods. This was the time in our lives that everyone's freezer was packed with healthy choice and lean cuisine, ready-to-eat meals. This was a time when fast food restaurants only ever, for a good 15 to 18 year run, only ever saw profits increase every single year. We were eating an enormous amount of fast food and prepared food items. Fast food chains were popping up all over the place. Do you remember that in the 90s? Suddenly, we went from the big 4 to the big 20. I mean, they just blew up all over the place. And another thing that was happening in the 90s is that the Big Gulp was a problem. Do you know what I'm talking about with the Big Gulp? If you live in Europe, you may not. But if you lived in New York City in 1995, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the Big Gulp was the giant, like 64-ounce soda that you would get at convenience stores, fast food stations, things like that. And you could refill them, I think, at no charge. Who knows how many times. Okay, so at this time, C. Everett Koop makes this announcement that Americans are in danger. The sodium intake we're taking in is through the roof. He's not wrong if that's the American you were at that time. No question about it. And at that time, the number of people in this country who were drinking soda, canned soda, and it does not matter if it is diet. Diet soda does not have less sodium necessarily than sugary regular soda. Canned diet drinks, canned regular soda as their only fluid intake in the day. Think about that. That was actually very common in the 90s. You know, you don't know until you know. And when you know better, you do better. So we learned we do better. Most Americans who discover that they're getting too much sodium in their diet are not there because they are shaking it on their steak at home. They're there because they're drinking it. It's coming in that Diet Coke that they're having at 8:30 in the morning, and the 2 Diet Pepsis they have at lunch, and the 1 Diet Pepsi that they have at 4 o'clock to just get that afternoon kick going. It's coming in through soda, diet soda, and pre-prepared foods. Now, what I mean by pre-prepared foods are foods that are absolutely in their current condition ready to eat. So, for example, check out your pantry. A bag of Doritos. All I had to do was open the bag and the food product was ready for me to eat. Here's another clue that's a high sodium pre-prepared food. It required nothing to keep it safe. So no refrigeration, no action on your part in any way, shape, or form. You could literally shove it into a dark place in the pantry and break into it and eat it 6 months later and all would be well. That's a big indicator that it's got a lot of sodium in it. Sodium is an excellent preservative. And so those types of foods tend to be really riddled with sodium. So if you are living on takeout, drive-through, diet sodas, chips, pre-prepared packaged foods, microwave dinners, canned soups, that, you know what? You might need to take a look at your sodium intake. But if you are a home gourmet who just loves cooking your own foods, but you've been dumbing it down with not enough salt, and you've known in your heart of hearts, it's not enough salt, there's not enough flavor there, but you've suffered through it thinking that you are the one who needs to pull salt out of your diet, think again. So there's that little warning right there. And so let's talk about how we get things too salty, not salty enough. How does it happen? How do we get there? One thing I want to say about the home cook is that we're often using the wrong salt. How about that? I'm going to do an entire podcast on iodized versus kosher, and we'll also do one on finishing salts and more flavored salts and things like that. But the short story is iodized salt. That's that really fine table salt that's in the shaker. Shake, 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 shake. That salt, the thing of it is that it is very hard to control as a home cook how much of that salt you're getting into anything. Excuse me. And it's such a fine grain. LaCroix, not sodium. Not soda. I wonder if there's sodium in this. 0 milligrams of sodium. Okay, anyway, iodized salt, iodized table salt. You need a lot of it to taste it. I can tell you that. It's so fine grained, it just sort of disappears in there. And it's very easy to sort of accidentally all of a sudden have too much of that super fine grained salt into your dish. So that's one thing I don't love as a home cook is if you're still stuck in the days of iodized salt. The other thing about iodized salt, by the way, is because it's been iodized and iodine has been added to it, it has a little bit of a metallic-y flavor to it. It's actually not my favorite taste-wise. If we can switch gears and get ourselves comfortable with the world of kosher salt, and for those who come to the cooking studio, they know this is all we use is kosher salt. And it's all I use at home as well. The thing about kosher salt is that it is coarser grained. And so it's much easier for me to manipulate it with my hands. I can pick it up and sprinkle a few grains into something and give it a taste. Because it's coarse grained, if I finish something with it, do you know I actually need less of it? That super fine grained iodized salt just melts right into the surface of something, right? But the coarse salt will kind of sit on top and it can get a little crunch. That was my crunch sound of a little grain of salt next to that bite of steak. And do you know that I actually need a little bit less salt when I'm going to taste it and feel it as a finishing salt? So there's that. And then the last thing is, how much salt do I use? Boy, oh boy, do recipes make that tricky, don't they? Salt to taste. Why do they say that? First of all, let me tell you very quickly why chefs do that. Salt to taste, salt to taste. Do you really want to know the real reason? It's not that they don't want to give you a number. And I know they would like to say it's because everybody has different tastes, blah, blah, blah. Here's the real truth behind that. Do you know that salt is completely intuitive? You actually instinctively know if something needs more salt. And here's how you'll know. You taste it and then you think, does that need more salt? If you are asking that question, the answer is yes. Did I just solve that for you? If you taste it and you wonder if it needs more salt, the answer is yes, it does. Pretty simple, right? If you taste it and go, oh, no, that's salty enough, but it's chili and it doesn't taste like chili, it just needs more cumin. Maybe it needs more chili powder. Maybe it needs more garlic. Garlic is one of my favorite things to bring in flavor when everything else is salty enough. But I promise you, intuitively, instinctively, your taste buds know when something is salted enough and when it's not. And so when you taste it and go, does that need a little? It 100% needs a little bit more salt. So stick with your instincts. And the reason chefs say salt to taste is because they are assuming you're going to rely on your own instinct to resolve that for you at home. But I'm going to give you an actual starting point, okay? Here's the easiest answer that I can give you. 1/4 of a teaspoon per serving. So my chili serves 4, I'll do a teaspoon of salt in that chili. Now, what I'll say about that formula is that's a good starting point. Don't get into doubles and triples. My chili serves 6 to 8. I don't know that I necessarily need 2 full teaspoons of salt in that. Start at that sort of base of about 1/4 of a teaspoon per serving for up to about 4 servings. Then you're going to taste it for salt and make your own decision about it from there. But I think that's an easy starting point, about 1/4 of a teaspoon per serving. But watch it. Like I said, if you're doing some big casserole and it serves 12, I don't know that you're going to need a tablespoon or more of salt in that. But start with 1/4 teaspoon per serving for about 4 to 6 servings and see how that feels to you. Get rid of that iodized salt. That does not go into your cooking. A 1/4 of a teaspoon of iodized salt is going to be too much salt. 1/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt will work out beautifully. So stop guessing. Let's try 1/4 of a teaspoon per serving. Lose the iodized salt in the shake, shake, shake. And, season as you go. Let's try that 1/4 of a teaspoon per serving. So we're going to do a pound of ground beef for chili that serves about 4. Let's do a teaspoon of salt right into that ground beef and onion mixture right in the pan, right when we're cooking it. Then once it's simmered for a while, we'll taste it. If it needs a little more salt before it goes out, we can do it then. But the short story for my home cooks, why aren't I getting that restaurant flavor at home? Why isn't my Asian stir fry tasting like the one at the restaurant? What's happening there? Season aggressively. I will mention this, that my good buddy Dennis Chan, who owns the restaurant here in Jacksonville, Blue Bamboo, we were doing a big open house here at the studio one time, and I didn't hear the question. I only heard the answer. I was barreling through the kitchen, and I heard Dennis answer a question to a customer, and the answer, I never heard the question. The answer was salt forward. That's all I heard him say. And I already know what the question was. Someone was asking him why she wasn't getting the results at home. Either she was asking him specifically because he has a cookbook, Hip Asian Comfort Food, which is such a great cookbook. Why, when she does the Rama Thai Delight out of his Hip Asian at home, it's not getting the same flavor profile that he's getting at the restaurant. Maybe she was asking something that specific. She could have been asking something just general. But his answer was salt forward. There you go. Season more aggressively. Think about why you're not putting enough salt in your food. And if you and your partner are forever fighting about the fact that the food's not salty enough, they might be right. Try seasoning it as you go. Lose the iodized salt. Bring out the kosher salt and see how that does for you. Just give it a try for, the next week of cooking and see what kind of results you get out of that. And watch those prepackaged foods. And again, if it's handed to you through your driver's side window, it's too salty. Not too salty, it's just got too much sodium in it, right? So be careful about those things too. All right, guys, that's it for Q&A with Chef A on salt forward, season aggressively, and why does my food not taste salty enough at home? Well, we're not using enough. Join me for some more podcasts for my Gumroad subscribers. Thank you. We've got recipes that go along with these for you as well. You can print those out over on your membership at gumroad.com. And if you're not a subscriber, you're welcome to join us there. If you do subscribe, that's what you get access to, are some bonus videos and PDF printables with lots of recipes to go along with the various pods. But otherwise, we'll see you guys on YouTube. And thank you for joining us for Q&A with Chef A. Up next, we're going to deep dive into kosher versus iodized and some flavored salts. All right, see you soon.